Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first of what I hope is many different stories that I'm going to bring you from the Middle Ages. We're starting off this story on Halloween, and so I found for you a ghost story from the Middle Ages that I think really encompasses a lot of what I expect to see from different medieval stories. So we're going to bring you that today. Let us start with the story of Sir Albert and the Ghost Knight. Our story begins back in England. This is probably from the 13th century, so this is about when we're going to be looking at this story beginning. This is the story of Albert, a true and chivalrous knight of Britain. He was said to be strong in arms and adorned with every virtue. This is a short story, but one perfect for Halloween 2020. We meet Albert as he is travelling through England, probably looking for a quest or some such, when he happened to enter a castle called Cathubica. This castle is somewhere near Cambridge or Vandalsbury. This land was called Vandalsbury because many years before Albert came to be there, Vandals pitched their tents on the summit of the hill after laying waste to the surrounding country and cruelly slaughtering the Christians in the local area. So Albert, our brave and virtuous knight, ends up at Cathubica and is invited into the castle by the occupants. As was common amongst chivalric classes, the nobles who lived in the castle invited him to rest there for the evening and to join them for supper. Supper was served. I imagine it was pretty great dinner, since almost every medieval story has an awesome description of feasts with honoured guests, but this story doesn't really mention it. So let's just imagine it's a really great dinner, okay? Okay. Albert and his hosts finish their dinner and all come together around the fire in the home in order to indulge in one of humans' oldest traditions, exchanging stories. If you've ever been camping or sat around in a blackout trying not to go crazy, bored without the internet, you know what I mean. This is a tradition that I personally see as sorely missing from our lives today. Anyway, let's dig right into this story and stop with my little tangents. Albert is having a great time getting to know his hosts and listening to the various stories they have. He also makes sure to share some of his own so they could better know him. One of the hosts decides to entertain him with an ancient story of the local ghost. In the plains of Vandalsbury exists a ghostly knight who can be revealed by any who challenges him under the light of the moon. A man need only enter the plain and call out the challenge. The ghostly knight would appear, fully armoured and armed and mounted, ready to charge. The encounter would always end with the overthrow of one of the parties. Of course, Albert, being the brave knight that he was, couldn't believe what he was hearing. Surely there was no ghostly knight occupying the area near these wonderful people. This would not do. They have offered their kindness and he must repay them. He informed his hosts that he would go there now, while the moon was shining. With the help of his squire, he donned his armour and they both rode down to the plain. The plain was surrounded by trenches, forcing Albert to traverse around it until he found the sole entry point. He ordered his squire to remain behind while he trotted into the plain and stood looking over it. It was empty. There was no knight, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Albert called out the challenge. The author does not tell us what he said, but I imagine myself doing it in my Australian way. Oi, Ghost Knight, if you give us a crack at knocking you down a peg or two, we don't like tall poppies around here. Anyway, Albert calls out his challenge and immediately a knight appears at the other end of the plain. This knight is fully armoured, carrying a lance and on top of his huge warhorse who was snorting and pawing at the ground, ready to charge. The knight didn't appear as a spirit or a ghost. He looked as real as the blood in Albert's veins. Albert would have been shocked and possibly a little bit scared if the ghost didn't immediately spur his horse into the charge. The translations I read had a pretty nice description, so I'm going to use that for the start of the combat. extending their shields and directing their lances at each other, the steeds were driven to the attaint, and both knights shaken by the career. Their lances break, but from the slipperiness of their armour, the blow did not take effect. It's good, right? Now, back to me. Although shaken, Albert pressed the ghostly knight, driving him from his horse. As the knight fell, Albert took the reins of his opponent's horse. The fallen knight rose and turned to see Albert riding off with his warhorse. He grabbed one of the broken lances and hurled it at Albert, just as one would a javelin. His aim was true, and the lance tip pierced Albert in the thigh, a dangerous and cruel wound. Albert, being the absolute boss that he is, and possibly full of a raging vortex of adrenaline and dopamine, didn't even flinch as the javelin hit him. He continued to lead the warhorse from the plain. He was ecstatic to see the curse was not only real, but that he could defeat it. He handed the charge of the horse to his squire and returned to Cathubica. He was greeted by the revelers who had told him of the night. They celebrated his return and his successful overthrowing of the ghostly knight. Albert dismounted and began to remove his armour. They were so overjoyed that no one noticed his wound until he removed his cuisse. As he pulled the armour off of his thigh, it revealed a large pool of clotted blood. Servants were roused from slumber and attendants called for the surgeon. As news spread through the households, many people made their way down to the courtyard to admire Albert's prize, the magnificent warhorse. His eyes sparkled like fire, and he arched his neck proudly. His hair was of a lustrous jet, and he bore a war saddle on his back. In no time at all, the cock began to crow. At this sound, the horse began furiously striking at the ground. His eyes rolled back, and foam began to appear at his mouth. He pulled out his restraints and broke free from the attendants. He charged from the courtyard, and though many chased him, he disappeared right in front of their eyes. Albert, however, was not left without a prize. The wound in his thigh healed into a large scar, a permanent reminder of his encounter. And on the anniversary of this night, each year the scar opened and the wounds bled. This would plague him for only a few short years, as he died not long after valiantly fighting against the pagans. And that, my friends, is the tale of the ghostly knight of Cathubica. Now its actual name is Of the Discomfiture of the Devil, from the Gesta Romanorum. I'm terrible at pronouncing that. The Gesta Romanorum is a terribly named book. The name means Deeds of the Romans, but it's actually a collection of parts of different works. It isn't a great read to the modern reader, but that's probably because it was likely intended as a sort of handbook for clerics to deliver sermons. Each of the tales is somehow related to a moral virtue. And that, my friends, is the story of Albert and the Ghost Knight. It's a fun little story, it's nice and short, but I thought it would be a great way to start this new adventure. We're going to be picking up lots of different stories from the Middle Ages and rewriting them to help tell some of those moral virtues. These are the stories that help build Western culture and help move people to change over time. And so I'd like to bring a few of them to you so that you too can enjoy the stories that knights, peasants, ladies, kings, princesses, princes, all of these people would have been raised on. These are the stories that helped inform how they thought and what they saw in the world around them. So I'm going to be bringing more of these for you. Please make sure that you hit like, you subscribe, and leave a comment below. And if you like the story, share it with your friends. Thanks very much, guys. This has been Medieval Matt and Storytime.